The U.S. military is now investigating what may be its worst sex scandal in more than 15 years. The first complaint came out of the Lackland Air Force Base in Texas involving sexual misconduct by male boot camp instructors toward female recruits. Take a look at this staggering statistic. According to the Washington Post, approximately 25% of the instructors in the 331st Training Squadron stand charged or are under investigation for sexual misconduct. One trainer has been charged with raping or sexually assaulting 10 women. Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speier has been calling for a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to sexual assaults in the military. She is urging the House Armed Services Committee to hold hearings on this latest black eye for the military and has the bipartisan support of 77 of her colleagues in Congress. Representative Jackie Speier joins me now from San Francisco. Thank you for being here this morning.
I'm happy to be with you, Melissa.
So, Congresswoman Speier, first, explain to me, how does the chain of command make this problem of sexual assault worse?
The chain of command creates an environment where there's an inherent conflict of interest. The number of cases of sexual assault where the victim has to report to her actual rapist is high, or the sexual assault is the result of a friend of the commander. So it creates this conflict of interest that, as a result, fewer people actually report the sexual assault or rape. And that's why at Lackland, while they have identified 31 victims, only one has actually reported the crime.
So explain to me, you have a legislative effort to challenge this, to move it outside of the chain of command. What would that effort do?
So it would keep it in the military, but move it outside the chain of command. So a victim would report to a special victims unit, which would be staffed by experts in investigations and prosecution, and then they would make the decision whether or not to move forward with the case. Right now, you have a unit commander or someone right above that unit commander who has no legal experience and evaluates the case, and they are judge and jury. They make the decision whether or not an investigation and prosecution moves forward, and they decide who is going to be the investigator and who's going to be the prosecutor. So it's a real stacked deck against the victim.
Congresswoman, it feels to me like one of the challenges, so I mean, luckily you have some bipartisan support on this, but it does feel to me like one of the challenges is that we as a public typically don't want to know bad things about our military. You know, we understand the pressures that soldiers are under, particularly in the context of long war and multiple deployments. How do we push past this kind of culture of silence in order to publicize this enough to protect women who are in the military?
You know, I think until very recently, there hasn't been a recognition that this issue is so widespread in the military. 19,000 cases of sexual assault and rape a year by DOD's own statistics, and only 13% report. And if you look at the statistics, even with the efforts that have been underway, and I believe that Secretary Panetta wants to do the right thing, but even so, the actual number of court-martials and convictions has dropped over last year. So we're not doing the right thing. And meanwhile, these victims are victimized a second time over. And I don't want to have members of the military, both men and women, who enlist, be more likely to be victims of violence from someone within their own unit than from the enemy.
You've been very clear that you believe that this is a systemic problem, not just an issue of sort of, you know, one-off bad behavior. The other sort of fundamental systemic thing that we're seeing is an increase in military suicide, so much so that there have been more U.S. military members who have lost their lives to their own hands, to suicide, than actually in Afghanistan itself. Do you see any correlation between the kind of systemic problems that allow and encourage and hide this kind of sexual assault and the kind of systemic problems that might be associated with this appalling suicide rate?
You know, the suicide rate is jarring. One every 80 seconds among veterans, and one a day among active military. All of the experts say there's not enough money being spent on mental health services within the military. It's about 4%. And much like sexual assault, I mean, in sexual assault, the focus is, oh, it's on the victim. Somehow they created the environment. Somehow they dressed provocatively. On the case of suicide and mental health issues, it's somehow the spouse's fault if there's there's in a marriage situation that it's something within the family that's causing the problem. So we've got to stop pointing the fingers and start just dealing with the cancer that exists within the system and fix it.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jackie Speier. We will keep our eyes on this issue, and we greatly appreciate your hard work on it.
Thank you.
Up next, I've got an incredible